The dust rose in choking clouds as Clara Whitmore stood on the wooden platform with her hands bound, watching the crowd of men below assess her and her cousin like livestock. And she swore to herself that whoever bought them would never break her spirit no matter how they tried. The year was 1869, and Red Bluff, California had become a lawless junction where desperate men made fortunes and lost souls disappeared into the vast wilderness beyond. Clara was 22 years old, with dark auburn hair that hung in tangled waves past her shoulders and green eyes that burned with defiance even as fear threatened to consume her. Beside her stood her younger cousin, Margaret, barely 18, trembling like a leaf in the scorching July heat. The girl's blonde hair stuck to her tear-stained cheeks as she clutched Clara's arm with both hands. They had been traveling west with their families when outlaws attacked their wagon train 3 days prior. The bandits killed the men, took everything of value, and dragged Clara and Margaret to this god-forsaken auction house run by a criminal named Dutch Cassidy. The local law turned a blind eye because Cassidy paid them well to ignore his business dealings. Women without protection became commodities in towns like this, sold to brothels or brutal men who needed workers for their remote homesteads. The auctioneer, a weasel-faced man with yellow teeth, grabbed Clara's chin and turned her face toward the crowd. "Look at this one, gentlemen. Strong, healthy, good breeding age, and the little blonde comes with her as a pair, starting bid at $200. Clara jerked her face away and spat at his feet. Several men in the crowd laughed while others looked interested. Margaret sobbed quietly, and Clara wished she could shield her cousin from all of this, wished they had died with their families instead of ending up here. "200, called a gruff voice from the back. "250, shouted another man, heavyset with a cruel smile that made Clara's stomach turn. 300. This voice was different, steady and calm. Clara searched the crowd and found its owner standing near the side of the platform. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair visible beneath a worn brown hat. His face was weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble. He wore dusty trail clothes and had a gun belt slung low on his hips, but something in his gray eyes seemed different from the other men leering at the platform. 350, countered the heavy-set man. 500, the tall cowboy said without hesitation, his gaze fixed on Clara with an intensity that made her breath catch. The crowd murmured in surprise. That was a considerable sum, more than most men here would spend on 2 women. The heavy-set man scowled and shook his head, stepping back. 500 going once, twice, sold to the stranger. The auctioneer banged his gavel and gestured for the cowboy to come collect his purchase. Clara felt her legs weaken as the reality crashed over her. She had been sold. They both had been sold. To a complete stranger who would now own them, control them, do whatever he pleased with them. Margaret collapsed against her, weeping uncontrollably. The cowboy approached the platform and pulled out a leather pouch, counting out gold coins into the auctioneer's greedy palm. Then he climbed the steps and stood before the 2 women. Up close, Clara could see the weariness in his face, the way his jaw was set with determination. He pulled a knife from his belt and she flinched, but he simply cut the ropes binding their wrists. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly, his voice a low drawl that carried a hint of Texas. Clara rubbed her chafed wrists and nodded, too stunned to speak. He helped Margaret down the platform steps, and Clara followed on shaky legs. The crowd was already dispersing, moving on to the next piece of human misery being sold. The cowboy led them away from the auction house toward the main street where 3 horses were tied outside the general store. "Wait here," he instructed, then disappeared into the store. Clara considered running, But where would they go? They had no money, no weapons, no knowledge of this country. And Margaret could barely stand on her own. The cowboy emerged minutes later carrying bundles wrapped in brown paper. He handed one to each of them. "There is a dress and some boots in there. Change of undergarments, too. The boarding house is down the street. They have a room where you can clean up and change." Clara stared at him suspiciously. "Why?" "Because you cannot ride in those torn dresses," he said simply, nodding toward their ruined clothing. "Ride where?" Clara demanded, finding her voice. "What exactly do you plan to do with us?" He met her eyes steadily. "I plan to take you somewhere safe and then set you free. But we need to leave Red Bluff first. Dutch Cassidy does not like it when his merchandise walks away, and I just made him $500 richer, which means he will probably try to rob me before sundown." Margaret gasped. Clara felt confusion swirling through her mind. "You are setting us free." "That was always the plan, miss. Now we are wasting time. Go change quickly. We need to be riding out within the hour." Clara wanted to believe him, but trust had become a luxury she could not afford. Still, he had bought them clothing and was giving them a chance to clean up. That was more courtesy than anyone else had shown them in 3 days. She took Margaret's hand and hurried toward the boarding house. The proprietor, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes, showed them to a small washroom and brought warm water and soap. Clara helped Margaret wash the dirt and blood from her skin, then scrubbed herself raw, trying to feel clean again. The dress the cowboy had purchased was simple calico, blue with tiny white flowers, but it was clean and fit reasonably well. The boots were sturdy leather, broken in enough to be comfortable. She helped Margaret into a similar brown dress and braided her cousin's hair to keep it out of her face. When they emerged, the cowboy was waiting outside with the horses. He had added a fourth mount, a gentle-looking mare with kind eyes. Without a word, he helped Margaret onto the mare, then turned to Clara. She ignored his offered hand and pulled herself into the saddle of a bay gelding, adjusting her skirts. "I am Samuel Lancaster," he said, mounting his own horse, a tall roan with a wild look in its eyes. "Most people call me Sam." "Clara Whitmore," she replied stiffly. "This is my cousin Margaret. Pleased to make your acquaintance, though I wish it were under better circumstances." He touched the brim of his hat, then led the fourth horse, a pack animal laden with supplies, as they started down the main street. Clara expected him to turn toward one of the rough trails leading to isolated homesteads, but instead he headed south on the main road. Her suspicion remained high, but she kept Margaret close as they rode. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and the landscape was brown and parched from summer heat. Rolling hills covered in dry grass stretched in every direction, dotted occasionally with scrubby oak trees. They rode for hours in near silence. Sam would occasionally point out landmarks or warn them of rough terrain, but otherwise kept to himself. Margaret dozed in her saddle, exhausted from trauma and fear. Clara remained alert, watching their guide for any sign of deception. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sam led them off the main road toward a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. "We will camp here for the night," he announced, dismounting. Clara helped Margaret down, and the girl immediately went to the creek to splash water on her face. Sam began unpacking supplies and setting up a simple camp. Clara watched him work, noting the efficient way he moved, the careful attention he paid to the horses before seeing to his own comfort. "You can stop staring at me like I am about to murder you both," he said without looking up from the fire he was building. "If I wanted to hurt you, I would have done it by now." "Why did you buy us?" Clara asked bluntly. "What do you really want?" Sam sat back on his heels and finally looked at her directly. The firelight caught in his gray eyes, making them look almost silver. My sister was sold at an auction like that 3 years ago in a town in Nevada. I searched for her for months, but I never found her. I heard rumors she ended up in a brothel in San Francisco, and by the time I got there, she had died from consumption. She was only 17. Clara felt her anger deflate slightly, replaced by a pang of sympathy. I am sorry. I swore after that if I ever had the chance to save someone from that fate, I would do it. I have been working cattle drives for the past 2 years, saving every penny. When I heard about the auction in Red Bluff, I rode hard to get here in time. He returned his attention to the fire, coaxing the flames to life. You are the first ones I have been able to help. I am just sorry I could not afford to buy more. Margaret joined them by the fire, sitting close to Clara. Sam pulled out supplies and began preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and hardtack. The smell made Clara's stomach growl painfully. She could not remember the last time she had eaten. They ate in silence, the food plain but satisfying. Afterward, Sam spread out bedrolls and gave the best blankets to Clara and Margaret. I will take first watch, he said, positioning himself between them and the open prairie with his rifle across his lap. Clara lay awake for a long time, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Beside her, Margaret finally fell into an exhausted sleep. Across the fire, Sam sat motionless, a silent guardian against the dangers of the night. For the first time in days, Clara felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen slightly. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to find gray dawn light filtering through the cottonwood branches. Sam was packing up camp, and coffee was already brewing over the rekindled fire. He looked tired, and she wondered if he had slept at all. Where are we going? Clara asked as she folded the blankets. Sacramento, Sam replied. It is about a 3-day ride from here. I have a friend there, a woman named Catherine who runs a boarding house for respectable working women. She can help you find employment and a safe place to live. Or if you have family elsewhere, I can help you purchase train tickets to wherever you need to go. Clara's throat tightened. Our families are dead. Everyone who was with the wagon train. Sam's expression darkened. Dutch Cassidy's men, no, different outlaws. They attacked us in the mountains near Nevada. Cassidy found us wandering and told us he would take us somewhere safe. She laughed bitterly. We were foolish enough to believe him. You were desperate, not foolish, Sam said firmly. Cassidy preys on people in exactly that situation. He is scum, and someday someone will put a bullet in him. They broke camp and continued south. The landscape gradually shifted as they traveled, becoming slightly greener as they moved away from the parched interior valleys. Sam proved to be an attentive guide, making sure they had enough water, finding shade during the hottest parts of the day, and keeping watch at night. On the second night, as they camped near a small ranch where Sam knew the owners, Clara found herself sitting with him by the fire while Margaret slept. The rancher's wife had been kind, giving them fresh bread and cheese, and the security of having other people nearby allowed them all to relax slightly. "Tell me about your sister," Clara said softly. Sam was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Her name was Sarah. She had blonde hair like your cousin and the brightest laugh you ever heard. After our parents died from cholera, I tried to take care of her, but I was only 19 and did not know what I was doing. We were traveling to California looking for work when we got separated in a town. I was only gone for an hour, but when I came back, she was gone. His voice cracked slightly. I should have protected her better. It was not your fault, Clara said gently. You were barely more than a child yourself. I was her older brother. I was all she had. He shook his head. I failed her, but I will not fail you and Margaret. I promise you will reach Sacramento safely." Clara studied his profile in the firelight, seeing the pain and determination etched in his features. Samuel Lancaster was not what she had expected when she stood on that auction platform. He was honorable, kind, and carried his own heavy burden of loss. Something in her chest shifted, a feeling she could not quite name. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I know we have not been easy to help." Sam turned to look at her, and their eyes met across the fire. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You have been plenty easy, Miss Whitmore. I appreciate that you did not stab me in my sleep the first night." She found herself smiling back despite everything. "The thought did cross my mind. I figured as much. You have fire in you. That is good. You will need it to build a new life." They talked late into the night, sharing stories from before their worlds had fallen apart. Clara learned that Sam had grown up on a small farm in Texas, that he loved horses more than people most days, and that he dreamed of eventually having his own ranch. She told him about her life in Missouri, about her love of reading and her plans to become a teacher before everything had gone wrong. When she finally retired to her bedroll, Clara felt something she had thought lost forever: hope. The third day of travel brought them into the outskirts of Sacramento. The city was bustling and loud, full of people seeking fortune in the gold fields or building new lives in California. Sam led them through the crowded streets to a tidy boarding house painted white with green shutters. A sign out front read, "Catherine's Residence for Women." A tall woman with graying hair and a warm smile answered Sam's knock. "Samuel Lancaster, I heard you were working up north. Come in, come in." Sam introduced Clara and Margaret, explaining their situation in quiet tones. Catherine's expression grew sympathetic, and she immediately ushered the young women inside. "You poor dears. Do not worry, you are safe now. I have 2 rooms available, and I can help you find work. There are several families in Sacramento looking for governesses and companions." Sam lingered in the doorway, suddenly looking uncertain. Clara realized with a start that he was preparing to leave, to ride away and disappear from their lives. The thought created an unexpected ache in her chest. "Sam," she said, stepping back toward him, "will you stay in Sacramento for a while? I would like to repay you somehow for everything you have done." He shook his head. "No repayment necessary, Miss Whitmore. I am just glad you are safe. At least let me write to you to let you know how we are doing." She felt desperate suddenly, unwilling to let this connection slip away. Sam pulled a worn piece of paper from his pocket and scribbled an address. "I will be working at the Triple Bar Ranch about 30 miles east of here. You can send letters there." He handed her the paper, and their fingers brushed. The contact sent a jolt through Clara that she felt all the way to her toes. "Thank you, Samuel Lancaster," she said softly. "You saved our lives." "Just Sam," he said with a small smile. "And you saved yourselves by surviving. I just helped a little." He tipped his hat to Catherine, nodded to Margaret, and held Clara's gaze for one more long moment before turning and walking away. Clara stood in the doorway watching until he disappeared around a corner, already feeling his absence like a physical loss. The following weeks passed in a blur of adjustment. Catherine proved to be as kind as Sam had promised, helping Clara and Margaret settle into their new lives. Margaret, still fragile from their ordeal, took a position as a companion to an elderly widow who needed someone to read to her and help with correspondence. Clara found work as a governess for a prosperous merchant family, teaching their 3 daughters. The work was demanding but satisfying, and for the first time since the wagon train attack, Clara felt like she might actually have a future. But every night, she found herself thinking about Sam. She wrote him letters detailing her new life, thanking him again for his kindness, asking about his work at the ranch. His responses came slowly but were thoughtful, written in careful script that suggested he did not write often. He told her about the horses he was training, about the beauty of the Sierra Nevada foothills, about the quiet satisfaction of hard work. Over months, their correspondence grew more personal. Sam wrote about his dreams and fears, about the guilt he still carried over his sister's death. Clara shared her own struggles with nightmares about the auction, her determination to build something meaningful from the ashes of her old life. She found herself anticipating his letters with an eagerness that went beyond simple gratitude. By October, as autumn painted the Sacramento Valley in shades of gold and russet, Clara had to admit to herself that she was falling in love with Samuel Lancaster. The realization terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. How could she love someone she had spent only 3 days with? Yet his words on paper had shown her his heart, and his actions had demonstrated his character more clearly than years of courtship might have. One Saturday afternoon, as Clara was returning from the market with Margaret, they rounded a corner and nearly collided with a familiar figure. Sam stood on the sidewalk looking slightly lost, his hat in his hands, wearing clean clothes that looked uncomfortable on his rangy frame. "Sam!" Clara's heart leaped into her throat. His face broke into a genuine smile. "Hello, Clara, Margaret," he nodded to both of them. "I hope you do not mind me calling on you. I should have sent word ahead, but I was afraid you might tell me not to come." "Why would I do that?" Clara asked breathlessly. "Because I am just a cowboy with no real prospects, and you have built a good life here. But I have been thinking about you every day since I left, and I finally realized I was a fool to ride away." He took a step closer. "Clara Whitmore, would you allow me to court you properly? I know we met in the worst possible circumstances, but I would like a chance to show you who I am when I am not buying women at auctions and running from outlaws." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes, but she was smiling so wide her face hurt. "Yes. Yes, Samuel Lancaster, I would very much like that." Margaret squeezed Clara's hand and whispered, "I will tell Catherine you will be late for dinner," before hurrying away with poorly concealed delight. Sam offered Clara his arm, and they walked through Sacramento's streets as the afternoon sun cast long shadows. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, relearning each other in person after months of letters. Clara discovered that his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, that he had a scar on his right hand from a horse bite, that he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Over the following months, Sam courted Clara with patient determination. He rode into Sacramento every weekend, bringing small gifts and big smiles. They attended church socials and town dances. He was respectful and kind, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but making his intentions perfectly clear. He was building a future for them. Clara fell more deeply in love with each passing week. Sam was everything she had never known she wanted. Strong but gentle, determined but patient, haunted by his past but still capable of hope. He made her laugh, listened to her dreams, and treated her like an equal partner rather than property. In February of 1870, on a crisp evening with the first stars emerging in a purple sky, Sam took Clara for a walk along the Sacramento River. He had been unusually quiet all day, and Clara suspected she knew why. Her heart was already racing when he stopped and turned to face her. "Clara, I know we have not been courting long by conventional standards, but I have known since the moment I saw you on that platform that you were special. You have survived things that would break most people, and you have built a good life from nothing. You are strong and smart and beautiful, and I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person." He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "I am asking you to marry me, to build a life with me." I cannot promise you riches or an easy road, but I can promise you my whole heart and my best effort every single day. Will you marry me?" Clara's vision blurred with tears as she nodded. "Yes, Sam. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her weak in the knees. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he whispered. "I could never regret choosing you," Clara replied, meaning every word. They married in April in a simple ceremony at the church in Sacramento. Margaret stood as Clara's maid of honor, crying happy tears throughout the service. Catherine hosted a small reception at the boarding house, and several of Sam's friends from the Triple Bar Ranch attended, along with the merchant family Clara had been working for. Sam had saved enough money to purchase a small piece of land in the foothills, about 20 miles from the ranch where he worked. It was not much, just 80 acres with a creek running through it and a small cabin that needed work, but it was theirs. Clara had never imagined being a rancher's wife, but as Sam carried her over the threshold of their new home, she felt a fierce joy in her chest. Their first year of marriage was hard work, but deeply satisfying. They spent their days building their ranch, starting with a small herd of cattle and horses that Sam trained and sold. Clara planted a garden, fixed up the cabin, and discovered she had a talent for managing their finances. In the evenings, they would sit on their small porch watching the sun set over the hills, talking about their plans and dreams. Margaret visited often, sometimes staying for weeks at a time. She had blossomed in Sacramento, gaining confidence and eventually accepting a marriage proposal from a young banker who adored her. Seeing her cousin happy and safe filled Clara with profound gratitude. In the spring of 1871, Clara discovered she was pregnant. Sam was overjoyed, immediately becoming even more protective and attentive than before. He built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it smooth and carving their initials into the headboard. Clara sewed tiny clothes and blankets, preparing for the baby with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Their son was born in December during a rare California snowfall. They named him James Samuel Lancaster, and he had his father's gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair. Sam held his son with shaking hands and tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, overwhelmed by the responsibility and love. "Thank you," he whispered to Clara as she rested in their bed. "Thank you for giving me a family again." Clara reached up to touch his face. "We are building this together, you and me and this little one." Life settled into a rhythm of hard work and deep contentment. Their ranch grew slowly but steadily. Sam's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and buyers began seeking him out. Clara kept their books, raised James, and eventually started teaching reading to children from neighboring ranches, holding lessons in their small parlor. In 1873, their daughter was born, a tiny thing with blonde hair and Sam's serious expression. They named her Sarah after Sam's lost sister, and he wept when he held her for the first time. "I think she would have liked that," Clara said gently, and Sam nodded, unable to speak. The years passed with a sweetness Clara had never expected to find after the horrors of that auction platform. She and Sam grew old together, their hands weathered by work, their faces lined by sun and laughter. Their children grew strong and kind, learning the value of hard work and the importance of helping others. Margaret and her husband, David, remained close friends, visiting regularly and eventually moving to a property just 10 miles away when David left banking to try his hand at farming. The cousins who had survived hell together remained each other's closest confidants, often sitting together on Clara's porch sharing tea and memories. In the summer of 1875, a young woman appeared at their ranch, thin and frightened, asking for work and clearly running from something. Clara saw Sam's expression shift as he looked at her, seeing perhaps a ghost of his sister in this lost soul. Without hesitation, they took her in, gave her food and shelter, and helped her find her footing. She was the first of many over the years. The Lancaster Ranch became known as a place where people in trouble could find help. No questions asked. Sam never forgot what it felt like to fail his sister, and Clara never forgot the terror of standing on that auction block. Together, they turned their pain into purpose, offering refuge to others who needed it. Some stayed for days, others for months, but all left better than they arrived. James grew into a tall, serious young man who loved horses as much as his father. Sarah was bright and determined, insisting on learning to read and write far beyond what most girls studied, declaring she would be a teacher like her mother. In 1880, when James was 9 and Sarah was 7, Clara gave birth to another son, Thomas, a surprise baby who arrived with a lusty cry and a full head of dark hair. 3 children, Sam marveled, holding Thomas while their older children crowded around to see their new brother. We have been blessed beyond measure. Clara watched her family gathered together in the cabin that had grown over the years, adding rooms as needed, and felt her heart swell with gratitude. From the depths of despair had come this beautiful life, this family built on love and determination. As Thomas grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Sam hired a few hands to help with the work, choosing men carefully based on character rather than skill, often giving chances to those others had given up on. The Lancaster Ranch became known for its fine horses and fairer treatment of workers. In 1885, Margaret's husband David passed away suddenly from a heart ailment, leaving her devastated. Without hesitation, Clara and Sam invited her to move to their ranch permanently. She accepted, taking over a section of the expanded house and becoming an integral part of their family. She helped Clara with the children and the cooking, and her presence brought comfort to them all. James, at 14, began working seriously with the horses, showing his father's natural talent. Sarah, at 12, helped Clara with the teaching, proving to have a gift for explaining difficult concepts to younger children. Thomas, at 5, was the wild one, always getting into mischief and making everyone laugh. The years continued their steady march, bringing changes and challenges. Droughts came and went, cattle prices fluctuated, and neighbors struggled and succeeded in turns. Through it all, Clara and Sam remained each other's anchor. Their love, forged in crisis and tempered by time, only grew stronger. On quiet evenings, Sam would sometimes take Clara's hand and say, "Do you ever regret it? Marrying a cowboy with dirt under his fingernails instead of staying in Sacramento?" And Clara would always reply, "You are not just any cowboy, Samuel Lancaster. You are the man who saw me as a person when others saw merchandise. You are the man who chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. I have never regretted a single day with you." In the winter of 1889, 20 years after that fateful day in Red Bluff, Clara stood on their porch watching Sam work with a young colt in the corral. He was 44 now, his dark hair streaked with silver, his face deeply lined by weather and time. But to her, he was still the man who had climbed that auction platform and cut her bonds, setting her free in every sense of the word. James was 18 now, a skilled horseman courting a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch. Sarah, at 16, had announced her intention to attend the new teachers' college opening in Sacramento, determined to get formal certification. Thomas, at 9, was finally settling down slightly, showing interest in his father's work with horses. Margaret, living with them still, had found peace in her widowhood, surrounded by the family she had nearly lost. She and Clara often talked about those dark days in Red Bluff, marveling at how far they had come, how much they had built from ashes and pain. Sam finished with the colt and walked toward the house, his gait still easy despite the years of hard work. He climbed the porch steps and settled beside Clara on the bench he had built decades ago, taking her hand in his roughened one. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his gray eyes still sharp and kind. "Everything," Clara replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "How scared I was that day, how certain I was that my life was over, and how wrong I was." "You saved yourself," Sam said, as he always did when she thanked him. "I just gave you a chance." "You gave me everything," Clara corrected. "You gave me freedom, safety, and love. You gave me this life, these children, this home. You gave me a future when I thought I had none." Sam wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "We gave each other everything. That is what love does. It multiplies instead of divides." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. From inside the house came the sounds of their children arguing over a board game while Margaret refereed with patient amusement. The horses nickered in the corral, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine from the distant mountains. This was their life, built from nothing, treasured beyond measure. Clara had stood on an auction block believing her story was ending, but instead it had been beginning. Every day since Sam had bought her freedom, she had chosen to build rather than break, to love rather than hate, to hope rather than despair. In 1892, James married his sweetheart, Emily, in a beautiful ceremony on the ranch. They built a small house on the property, planning to take over the horse training business eventually. Sarah graduated from Teachers College and secured a position at a school in Sacramento, though she visited home often. Thomas, at 12, was growing like a weed and showed signs of his father's quiet strength. Clara and Sam became grandparents in 1893, when Emily gave birth to a daughter they named Clara Margaret, honoring both women who had survived so much. Holding her tiny granddaughter, Clara felt the circle complete. From tragedy had come blessing, from despair had come hope, from bondage had come the deepest freedom of all. As they aged into their 50s and beyond, Clara and Sam remained devoted to each other and to the principle that had guided them from the beginning, that every person deserved dignity, freedom, and a chance to build something beautiful. Their ranch continued to be a haven for those in need, and their reputation for fairness and kindness spread throughout the region. In the early spring of 1900, as a new century dawned, Clara and Sam celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and friends. Margaret, now gray-haired but still lively, helped organize the celebration. James and Emily brought their 3 children. Sarah arrived from Sacramento with news that she was engaged to a fellow teacher. Thomas, now 20, worked the ranch alongside his father. At the party, Sam stood and raised his glass. 30 years ago, I made the best decision of my life." Clara Whitmore agreed to take a chance on a broken-down cowboy with more dreams than sense. "She has made every day since then worth living. To my wife, my partner, my love." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks as everyone cheered. She looked around at all they had built together, at the family and community they had created from nothing, at the legacy of kindness they would leave behind. Her eyes met Sam's across the crowd, and the love she saw there was as strong as the day he had first kissed her by the Sacramento River. Later that night, as they prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 30 years, Sam pulled Clara into his arms. "I love you more today than I did on our wedding day," he said softly. I did not think that was possible, but you keep proving me wrong. Clara smiled against his chest. I love you beyond measure, Samuel Lancaster. Thank you for seeing me when I needed to be seen, for freeing me when I needed to be freed, and for loving me every day since. They held each other in the darkness, two souls who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built the best of lives. Outside, the California night was clear and starlit, the ranch quiet and peaceful. Inside, surrounded by memories and love, Clara and Sam rested in the certainty that they had chosen well, loved deeply, and built something that would outlast them both. Their story, which began with chains and fear on an auction platform in Red Bluff, had become a testament to the power of human kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative nature of true love. They had taken the worst moment of their lives and turned it into the foundation of their greatest joy. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons changing and children growing. By 1905, Clara and Sam were in their 60s, moving slower but still active on their ranch. James had fully taken over the horse training operation, proving himself even more talented than his father. Sarah and her husband, Robert, had 3 children and ran a successful school in Sacramento. Thomas had married a spirited young woman named Anna, and they were building their own herd on a section of the Lancaster land. The ranch now sprawled over 300 acres, testimony to decades of hard work and careful management. Clara still kept the books and taught reading to local children, though Margaret had taken over most of the cooking and household management. The 2 cousins, now in their late 50s, remained as close as ever, often sitting together in the evenings sharing memories and laughter. One autumn afternoon in 1907, as golden leaves fell from the cottonwoods they had planted decades earlier, Clara and Sam took a long walk together across their property. At 62 and 64, respectively, they moved with the careful gait of people who had worked hard all their lives, but their hands were still entwined like young lovers. They stopped at the highest point of their land, looking out over the valley below. From here, they could see the main house, the expanded barns, the corrals full of fine horses, the homes where their children lived with their families. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the distant sound of children's laughter drifted on the breeze. "Look at all this," Sam said quietly. "Look at what we built. Look at what we survived," Clara replied, squeezing his hand. "I think about that girl on the auction platform sometimes, so scared and angry. I wish I could tell her that everything would be all right, that she would find love and family and purpose beyond her wildest dreams." Sam turned to face her, cupping her weathered cheek in his calloused palm. "That girl survived because she was strong. And she thrived because she chose to love instead of hate, to build instead of destroy. I am so proud to have spent my life beside her." Clara leaned into his touch, feeling the same flutter in her chest she had felt as a young woman. "And I am proud to have spent mine beside the man who understood that freedom is the greatest gift one person can give another." They stood together on that hilltop as the sun began its descent, 2 people who had found each other in darkness and walked together into light. Their love story, born from tragedy and auction blocks, had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of kindness that would echo through generations. As twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, they walked slowly back toward home, where family and warmth and love awaited. Behind them, their shadows stretched long across the land they had tamed together, the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. The story that began with Clara Whitmore standing on a platform in chains ended with Clara Lancaster walking freely across her own land, held by nothing but the loving hand of the man who had given her the most precious gift imaginable, the freedom to choose her own destiny and the privilege of choosing him.